This picture illustrates the pathway of water movement from soil solution until they reach at the xylem tissue. It begins with the root hair cell, which is actually a specialized epidermal cell found at the root of plants. With the extension of cytoplasm that can increase the surface area of water reabsorption, and the water will start to move across the regions called as cortex until they reach at a ring of the cell, which are endodermis. Endodermis is characterized with transparent strip, and after the endodermis, there's another ring of cells which is pericycle, and the water will be transported into the stele, which is actually the vascular cylinder that consists of the transport tissue of plants. Water will be transported into the xylem tissue, which is a water transporting tissue that can transport the water from the root part up to the shoot part. Root hair cell is the specialized epidermal cell with the extended cytoplasm that can increase the surface area for water reabsorption. Water reabsorption occurs is due to the higher water potential in soil solution. This is because in the cell set of root hair, they contains higher solute concentration, which includes the dissolved mineral ions and the sugars. So, water will diffuse from the soil solution with the higher water potential to the root hair cell by osmosis. When the water reaches at the root hair cell, it increases the water potential of the root hair cell, and they cause the water move from the root hair to the neighboring cell, which is the cortex cell, by osmosis. Once cortex cell accept the water molecules, they increase the water potential, and the water will keep moving to the next cortex cell with the lower water potential. So this is how the water start to diffuse from one cell to the next cell, down concentration, down water potential gradients, until they reach at the endodermis, which consists of a layer of endodermal cells. The water will keep moving by osmosis from endodermis to the pericycle, which is another layer of plant cells, down the water potential gradients, until the water reach at the xylem vessels, which is the xylem tissue that able to transport water from root to shoot. Lateral pathway means the route where the water reabsorption occurs at the root hair cells, and they start to move from the cells through the cortex until they reach at the endodermis, past the pericycle, and reach at the stele that consists of vessels, which is a cell of xylem tissue. And there are three lateral pathways that involve for the water movement at root. The first lateral pathway is called as apoplast or apoplastic pathway, which means the water molecules are transported from the cell to the next cell through the cell wall. If the cells are loosely arranged, the water molecules will move through the extracellular space. The second pathway is symplast pathway or symplastic route, means that the waters and the dissolved minerals are transported from one cell to another cell through the cytosol, and also via the microscopic channel, which is the plasmodesmata. The third pathway is transmembrane pathway, means that the water and the dissolved minerals are transported from one cell to another cell through the membrane of the cells without passing the plasmodesmata. Apoplast pathway refers to the water movement in the cell wall. And if the water reabsorption occurs at the root hair cell begins with the cell wall, they will start to move until they reach at the region where the plant cells are loosely arranged. They will shift to the intercellular space, but they will channel back to the cell wall of the plant cell and keep moving until they reach at the endodermis. Endodermis consists of a layer of endodermal cell, and each of it have a waxy materials that found in the cell wall. The waxy materials is Casparian strip that able to prevent the water movement. Casparian strip is found at the cell wall of the endodermal cell, and it can prevent the water movement at the cell wall, which is the apoplast pathway. So, the water molecules will be shifted to another pathway, which is symplast pathway. Water will move into the cytosol of the endodermal cell, and then they live in the cell wall to the pericycle cell, and then move along the apoplast pathway until they reach at the xylem vessel of the xylem tissue. So, symplast pathway is actually referring how the water molecules can be transported from one cell to another cell through the cytosol and also the plasmodesmata until they reach at the xylem vessel of the xylem tissue. Waters always move from higher water potential to the lower water potential by osmosis. But at the epidermis and cortex of the root, some water and minerals are transported into the third pathway, which is the transmembrane pathway. So we can assume here is the changes of the pathway from apoplast, and the water will start to move from one cell to the next cell across the membrane of the plant cell without using the plasmodesmata between the plant cells. And this pathway is observable at these two types of cells, which are the epidermal cells and cortex cells. But eventually, the water molecules will shift back to the apoplast pathway and follow this pathway until they reach at the endodermal cell. So at the endodermal cell, since the water movement will be blocked or prevented by the Casparian strip, it will temporarily shift to the symplast pathway and then shift back to the apoplast pathway until they reach at the xylem tissue. So the water movement begins at the water reabsorption that occurs at the root hair cells, and the water movement will be occur in the three lateral pathway, which is considered as a short distance of water movement from the root hair cells until they reach at the xylem cells at the root. But how the water can be transported from the root part up to the shoot part against the gravity, and this is actually a long distance water movement. The upward movement of water through the xylem tissue in the plants is driven by two forces. The first one is the transpiration, cohesion, tension mechanism, which is very important for the tall plants. The second is the root pressure, which is more significant to be observed at the shorter plants. Transpiration, cohesion, tension mechanisms is very important to pull the waters from the root to the shoot of the plants, even though the plant is very tall. It begins with the process transpiration, which occurs at the stomata of leaf. And this process able to produce transpirational pull, which is a pulling force, diatarikan transpirasi. Other than this, there's other two important forces, which are cohesion, the attraction force between the water molecules, and adhesion, the attraction force between the water molecules with the wall of xylem vessels that play important role how they pull the water against the gravity. The third is osmosis, which is the type of water movement down water potential gradients. It means that the water can move from high water potential to low water potential. This means that root cells has the highest water potential, which is around negative 0.2 megapascal, compared to the leaf cell, which has the lowest water potential because water loss through the stomata with around negative 1.5 megapascal. It means that it's more negative the value is, that means the water potential is lower. So, sel akar yang mempunyai nilai yang kurang negatif, water potential dia adalah lebih tinggi. Manakala sel daun dengan nilai yang lebih negatif, maka water potential dianggap paling rendah. Stomata open during daytime, and this causes the water molecules can lose as water vapor from the mesophyll cell at the leaf into the atmosphere through stomata. The water loss as water vapor at the leaf surfaces is called as transpiration, and this will decrease the water potential and the hydrostatic pressure in the mesophyll cells. And this able to generate a negative pressure called as tension that at the xylem of the leaf to replace the water loss at the mesophyll cells. And water molecules will move from the high water potential to low water potential, which means from the xylem vessels of xylem tissue into the mesophyll cells and lost as water vapor through the stomata. This is a transpirational pull. The transpirational pull is a pulling force able to pull the water column in the xylem, which is the xylem sac that contains the water and the dissolved minerals. The xylem sac that contains the water molecules and dissolved minerals can be pulled outward from root to shoot, is aided by cohesion and adhesion. Adhesion is the attraction force that found between the water molecules with the cell wall of xylem vessels. This is important in pulling the xylem sac against the gravity. However, cohesion is the attraction force between the same molecules, which means it's actually the attraction force between the water molecules. They help in continuously pulling the xylem sac. Xylem sac is the fluid that found in the xylem tissue, and they cause the xylem sac being pulled without separation. Both cohesion and adhesion are actually the hydrogen bonds that we have studied in semester 1. When transpiration occurs at the stoma, which causes the water loss from the mesophyll cell at the leaf, water will diffuse from the xylem in leaf to replace the lost water, and this causes the xylem in the leaf always have the lower water potential. The lost water will be replaced by pulling the water from the xylem in the stem to replace it, and this will pull the water from the root xylem. And this causes the water potential in root xylem decreases, and they will enable the water diffusion from the soil solution through the root hair, cortex region, the endodermis, pericycle until they reach at the root xylem. The process is called as osmosis, and this generates the higher water potential at the root xylem. This is why the water molecules always move outwards from the root to the shoot. In the previous topic, we have studied how the potassium ion mechanism can cause the closure of stomata during the night time. and this can decrease the rate of transpiration. However, the plant cells still actively pump the dissolved mineral ions into the root cell, which has high mineral ions in the cytoplasm of the root cell. And this can cause the decrease in water potential until the water will move from the soil solution into the root cell by osmosis. And with the transportation of water molecules into the root cell, they can increase the hydrostatic pressure. But the water molecules cannot be lost through transpiration, and this causes accumulation of water in root cell until they form root pressure, which is actually a pushing force that can be observed in shorter plants. So, dengan kewujudan daya tolakan yang dipanggil sebagai root pressure ini, kita dapat memerhatikan pembentukan embun di tumbuhan yang pendek. So, in English, it's called as guttation, which means the exudation of water droplets from hydatodes. Maksudnya air itu akan ditolak keluar daripada tumbuhan dalam keadaan cecair. So, hydatode is actually the pore that can be found at the epidermis or margin of leaf. Di bahagian daun ada pembukaan yang dipanggil sebagai hydatode, and it are surrounded by two crescent-shaped cells which remain open. Maksudnya, perbezaan yang paling utama antara hydatode dengan stomata ialah hydatode adalah liang yang selalu buka, manakala stomata adalah liang pada bahagian daun yang boleh buka dan tutup berdasarkan potassium ion mechanism. Not only the water reabsorption can occur at root, the mineral ions in the soil can be uptaken in root, but mostly occurs through active transport. And the active transport of mineral ions can be observed at endodermis because the movement will be blocked by the conspiring strip. So to ensure the mineral ions reach at the cellular tissue, active transport will take part. Active transport means that the movement of mineral ions against concentration gradients. So, the mineral ions such as potassium ion and chloride ion can be transported from the lower concentration, which is the soil solution, into the higher concentration, which is the cytoplasm of root cell. But how the movement can be occur is actually closely related with the activation of proton pump. When ATP energy is hydrolyzed to produce the energy for the proton pump to pump out the hydrogen ion from low concentration to high concentration at the soil solution. This pumping out of hydrogen ion into the soil solution will accumulate the hydrogen ion at outside of the cell. And this can activate the potassium channel and the chloride channel to start transport the potassium ion and the chloride ion into the cytoplasm of the cell. However, the mineral ions can be transported from the soil solution into the root cell by passive transport when the concentration is higher in the soil solution. And this can occur when they involve the usage of fertilizers. Since that mineral ions are hydrophilic molecules, so the transportation involved is facilitated diffusion, which is a process that do not require ATP.